Hey everybody, how's it going? Before we get into today's video, I want to ask to see if you're subscribed real quick. If you're not, it's free and it will let you know whenever we post new videos. Without further ado.
Stabilize the patient. Give me a full bioscan now.
Ixchil's cerulean scales rippled with stress patterns as he worked over the injured human diplomat. The medical bay's emergency alert continued to pulse in the background, its deep thrum matching the racing of his hearts. Around him, the other medical staff rushed to tend to the various delegates wounded in the explosion. Their voices a cacophony of different species' languages as universal translators struggled to keep up. Bioscan complete, the medical system announced. Warning, unknown metallic contamination detected in circulatory system. Recommend immediate...
That's impossible,
Ixchil muttered, checking the readout himself. The scan showed high concentrations of iron throughout the human's bloodstream, far beyond what could be explained by environmental exposure.
Run it again.
Earth's primary delegate, Lawrence Bailey, according to his credentials, lay unconscious on the examination table. Shrapnel wounds peppered his left side where he'd shielded another delegate from the blast. The wounds themselves were superficial, but this apparent contamination... Second scans confirm initial results, the system reported. Metallic elements present in all blood samples. Composition primarily iron-based. Ixchil's throat frills flared in response. The human's vital signs remained stable, despite what should have been lethal levels of metal contamination. Not only stable, they appeared completely normal for the species according to the limited baseline data available from first contact.
Junior xenobiologist Ixchil.
A sharp voice cut through his thoughts.
Report your patient's status.
Ixchil turned to face head physician Quetzal, whose now crimson scales had shifted to their formal pattern of authority.
The human diplomat is stable, but...
But what? Speak clearly, Quetzal intoned authoritatively. He'd always had something of a dislike for Ixchil's youthful naivety, or dangerous ignorance if you take Quetzal's perspective.
The scans show significant levels of iron throughout his circulatory system. I have never seen anything like it. The metal appears to be...
Iron? Quetzal's scales rippled with alarm.
In the circulatory system? Impossible. Clear this bay immediately. We need containment protocols. Sir, I don't think... You don't think?
Quetzal's head crest fully extended.
You're right. You don't. This is the first major diplomatic summit since first contact. We cannot risk contamination spreading between species. Clear the bay, now!
The commotion at the door drew their attention. Melissa Rodriguez, the secondary human delegate, pushed past the security detail. Unlike Lawrence, she had a full head of brown hair, only a handful of shades darker than her own tanned skin. Ixchil also noted her facial features to be quite distinct from that of Mr. Bailey's, but he didn't quite know how to describe it. It's always difficult with a new species. What he could tell is that she was several centimeters shorter than he was, and significantly less muscular. That is in line with the superficial biological reports about their sexual dimorphism, very unlike Ixchil's own species. It's nearly impossible to distinguish gender for Aquels based on appearance alone. Security Chief Jubalaxis followed close behind, his massive walrus-like form filling the doorway, which is thankfully designed to accommodate even his people's massive forms. Although he may look soft and squishy, beneath the layer of blubber he is one of the most physically powerful individuals in the entire building. And also one of the friendliest. Ixchil had somewhat awkward but novel experience learning how comfortable a Lorwellian hug can be. Though he had seen how terrifying the chief can be when he wants to be.
Let me see him,
Rodriguez demanded.
Is Lawrence all right? Ma'am, please, remain outside,
Quetzal ordered.
We've detected dangerous contamination.
Contamination? Rodriguez's expression shifted from concern to confusion.
What's contamination? There are high levels of iron in his blood,
Ixchil explained, earning a sharp look from Quetzal.
The system flags it as toxic, but his vitals are stable.
Rodriguez stared at them for a moment before understanding dawned on her face.
Iron in his blood? That's normal for humans. It's how our bodies distribute oxygen.
The medical bay fell silent. Ixchil's scales rippled with intense interest as his mind raced through the implications. A species that naturally incorporated iron into their biology. The scientific possibilities were staggering.
Impossible. Impossible,
Quetzal declared.
No evolved species would develop such an inefficient solution. The risk of oxidation alone. With all due respect,
Rodriguez interrupted.
It's not only possible, it's fact. Every human has iron-based hemoglobin in their blood. It's basic human biology.
Ixil, along with everyone else in the room, noticed Chief Jubilax's shift his weight, massive tusks clicking together thoughtfully. Rodriguez, being a well-trained politician, did not let her shock at seeing walrus tusks move independently of their face show on her own.
Regardless of what's normal for humans,
Quetzal continued, breaking the awkward silence that always follows Jubilaxis' reactions, given how much he commands room simply by existing.
We must follow containment protocols. The risk of cross-contamination. Sir,
Ixil interjected, his scales darkening with determination.
If this is indeed natural for humans, perhaps we should focus on treating the ambassador's actual injuries first?
Quetzal's scales flashed warning patterns, but before he could respond, a groan from the examination table drew everyone's attention. Ambassador Bailey was regaining consciousness.
What happened?
The human diplomat asked, wincing as he tried to sit up. His somewhat pale-colored skin masked by the now torn and red-stained fabrics of what was once a very, very nice suit.
Please remain still, Ambassador,
Ixil said, moving to support him.
There was an explosion at the summit. You were injured protecting the Centaurian delegate.
Bailey nodded slowly, his hairless head shining with the reflection of the medical lighting, then noticed the tension in the room. Is everything all right? Ixil glanced between Quetzal and Rodriguez, sensing the growing conflict between medical protocol and diplomatic necessity. The first major summit since first contact was already fraught with tension. This misunderstanding could easily escalate if not handled carefully. And yet, beneath his concern, Ixil couldn't suppress his scientific curiosity. A species that evolved to use iron as a fundamental part of their biology? The implications were fascinating. He needed to know more, regardless of what his superiors might think. The medical bay's atmosphere grew increasingly tense as Quetzal paced before the examination table, his scales shifting through patterns of agitation. Bailey watched the head physician with diplomatic patience, though Ixil noticed the human's jaw tightening slightly.
So, you're saying,
Quetzal's voice carried notes of barely contained frustration,
that your entire species simply evolved to use iron as an oxygen transport mechanism without any genetic engineering?
That's correct, Bailey replied, maintaining his composure despite the accusatory tone. Iron-based hemoglobin is present in many Earth species, not just humans. It's been part of our evolution for millions of years. Ixil moved to check Bailey's wounds, using the opportunity to study the human more closely. The shrapnel had torn through the diplomat's formal attire, but hadn't penetrated deeply. Still, the injuries needed proper treatment.
Sir, Ixil addressed Quetzal, these wounds require attention. Whatever we believe about human biology, leaving them untreated poses a greater risk. Treat the wounds,
Quetzal conceded.
But maintain isolation protocols. No contact with other patients.
Chief Jubilaxis shifted his massive bulk away from the doorway.
The explosion injured 12 delegates from 8 species. We don't have the space or resources for complete isolation.
Then make space,
Quetzal snapped.
This facility,
a deep voice from the corridor interrupted him,
is currently hosting the most important diplomatic gathering since first contact.
Medical Research Director Votkali entered the bay, his aged scales set in patterns of authority that even Quetzal couldn't ignore. The director's presence immediately changed the room's dynamics.
Director,
Quetzal's scale shifted to formal respect.
We have a situation involving potentially dangerous biological contamination.
I've reviewed the initial reports.
Votkali cut him off.
And I've accessed Earth's publicly shared medical database. It seems that our human friends have been quite transparent about their biology.
Ixil seized the opportunity to speak up.
Director, the human circulatory system appears to have evolved complex mechanisms to manage iron transport. If we could study...
Absolutely not, Quetzal interrupted.
We cannot risk...
Risk what, exactly? Rodriguez stepped forward. Learning something new? Understanding a different evolutionary path? Bailey raised a hand in a calming gesture. Perhaps we could find a compromise. Earth is willing to share our medical data, but we need to ensure proper treatment for all injured parties first. Votkali's scales rippled with approval.
Agreed. Ixil, continue treating the ambassador's wounds. Quetzal, focus on coordinating care for the other delegates.
He turned to address Bailey directly.
With your permission, Ambassador, I would like to establish a formal research initiative to study human biology. For medical compatibility purposes, of course.
Of course? Bailey nodded, then winced as Ixil began cleaning one of his wounds. Though I hope this won't impact the summit's primary agenda.
The summit will proceed as planned.
Chief Jubilaxis assured him, tusks clicking affirmatively.
Though security protocols will be significantly enhanced, the perpetrators of this attack intended to disrupt diplomatic relations. We won't give them that satisfaction.
As Ixo worked, his mind raced with questions. How had humans managed to evolve such precise control over a normally toxic metal? What other surprises might their biology hold? He caught Voktali watching him with what appeared to be amusement.
Ixo,
The director's skill shifted to a teaching pattern.
what's the primary challenge in treating wounds across different species?
Biochemical compatibility.
Ixo answered immediately.
Ensuring treatment methods don't cause adverse reactions.
Precisely. And what does that suggest about our current situation?
Before Ixo could respond, one of the monitoring systems chimed an alert. The wounded Centaurian delegate in the next bay was showing signs of biochemical stress.
Director?
Quetzal's scales flashed urgent patterns.
This proves my point about contamination risks. We need to implement a full quarantine.
We need to understand.
Voktali corrected.
Knowledge before action, Quetzal. Always.
He turned to Bailey.
Ambassador, would you be willing to provide additional blood samples for analysis? Strictly under diplomatic oversight, of course.
Bailey exchanged glances with Rodriguez before nodding. If it'll help treat the injured, of course. Though I hope this won't be seen as representing any biological threat from humanity.
Quite the opposite.
Votkali assured him, his scale showing genuine interest.
I suspect we have much to learn from your species' unique adaptation.
He gestured to Ixo.
Continue your work, junior xenobiologist. Document everything. Knowledge may prove our most vital diplomatic tool.
Ixo nodded, his scales brightening with purpose. Yet, as he returned to treating Bailey's wounds, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something important. The Centaurian's sudden symptoms, the timing of the attack, pieces of a puzzle he couldn't quite see. His research lab felt unusually cold as he studied the latest test results. A day had passed since the explosion, and what started as a simple case of chemical curiosity had evolved into something far more complex. The screen before him displayed cellular interaction patterns he'd never seen before. The door hissed open, admitting Voktali. The director's scale showed concern as he studied Ixo's hunched posture.
You missed the morning briefing,
Voktali noted, moving to examine the display.
I assume you found something worth the breach in protocol.
Look at this.
Ixo adjusted the magnification.
Human blood cells don't just transport iron. They actively manage it. They use oxidation as a transport mechanism. The volatility that usually makes iron so toxic when it contaminates the blood is exactly the blood relies upon.
Interesting, but not worth missing a mandatory briefing.
Votkali's scale shifted back to a teaching pattern.
Especially given recent developments.
Ixo's throat frills contracted.
What developments?
3 more delegates develop symptoms similar to the Centaurian. Quetzal is calling for a complete suspension of the summit.
That's excessive,
Ixo protested, pulling up another data set.
The symptoms are mild, and there's no evidence of... Evidence?
Quetzal's voice cut through the lab as the head physician entered.
You want evidence? How about 4 deteriorating patients and a completely unknown biological contaminant?
Ixo's scales darkened with frustration.
We don't know it's a contaminant. The timing suggests exactly what I warned about.
Quetzal interrupted.
Cross-species contamination from improper isolation procedures.
His scales flashed accusation patterns.
Procedures you argued against.
If I may,
Votkali interjected.
Perhaps we should focus on understanding the mechanism rather than assigning blame.
A commotion in the corridor drew their attention. Chief Jubilaxis appeared in the doorway, Rodriguez at his side. She's been oddly involved in all this, when she should be taking over Bailey's position as primary delegate in his absence. She must be quite concerned for him. The security chief's usual jovial demeanor was notably absent.
We have a problem,
Jubilaxis announced.
Ambassador Bailey is insisting on attending today's session despite his condition, and 2 more delegates have reported symptoms.
His condition?
Ixo's throat frills flared with concern. Low-grade fever, fatigue, Rodriguez explained. Nothing serious. But, given the circumstances...
Nothing serious?
Quetzal's scales rippled with disbelief.
Unknown symptoms spreading amongst multiple species isn't serious?
Ixo turned back to his display, mind racing. Something about the pattern of infection nagged at him. He pulled up the medical logs, cross-referencing them with his research data.
Wait,
He muttered, scales brightening with sudden realization.
it's not contamination, it's interaction.
Explain, Vodkali prompted, moving closer to study the display.
The symptoms aren't showing up in all exposed delegates.
Ixil explained, bringing up a patient chart.
Only in those who had open wounds during the explosion. Those who might have had blood-to-blood contact. That supports my containment argument.
Quetzal insisted.
No, you don't understand.
Ixil's scales pulsed with excitement.
The human blood cells aren't just managing the iron. They're showing multiple distinct protein configurations. Look at these antigen markers.
He highlighted a section of the data, showing the complex variations in the human blood cells. The patterns of protein expression were unlike anything in medical literature.
Impossible,
Quetzal declared.
Natural blood variation within a single species should be minimal. These differences in protein structure.
Perhaps that's exactly what makes it work, Vodkali mused, studying the data with growing interest.
We've always assumed blood chemistry has to be uniform within a species. But humans evolved multiple compatible variations, each with its own sophisticated iron management system.
Director,
Quetzal's scales showed warning patterns.
you can't seriously be suggesting.
A priority alert emitted from the pagers of 3 medical personnel cut through their discussion. The medical system's calm voice carried an unmistakable note of urgency. Alert! Centurion delegate showing critical biochemical instability. Medical intervention required immediately. Ixil's heart raced as he processed the implications. The human blood cells weren't just interacting with other species' biology. They were actively attempting to establish new oxygen transport pathways. The sophistication of the process was staggering, but if it went wrong...
I'm ordering a full quarantine,
Quetzal announced, scales set in unmistakable authority patterns.
And Ixil, consider yourself relieved of duty pending formal review. You can't,
Ixil began.
I can, and I have.
Quetzal's pattern remained fixed.
Your fascination with human biology has compromised this facility's safety protocols. We'll be lucky if this doesn't end all diplomatic relations with Earth.
As Quetzal stormed out, Vodkali placed a steadying hand on Ixil's shoulder.
Continue your research,
He said quietly.
quietly. I'll handle the administrative details.
Ixil nodded, throat furls tight with determination. He was onto something important, something that could change their understanding of biology itself. He just had to prove it before the situation spiraled completely out of control. The maintenance access corridor was cramped for someone of Chief Jubilaxis' size, but the security chief managed to squeeze through with surprising grace. Ixil followed, carrying his portable analysis kit as they made their way to the quarantine medical bay.
10 minutes.
Jubilaxis rumbled quietly, tusks clicking with concern.
That's all I can guarantee without drawing attention.
It should be enough.
Ixil's scales rippled with gratitude.
Thank you for this.
Don't thank me yet. If Quetzal catches you here after your suspension.
The security chief left the threat unspoken. They revealed an access panel, and Jubilaxis quickly bypassed the security lockout. The panel slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a dimly lit quarantine ward. Inside, the affected delegates lay in various states of distress, monitoring systems tracking their deteriorating conditions. Ixil moved quickly to Bailey's bed. The human diplomat looked pale, but his vital signs remained relatively stable compared to the others. Next to him, the Centaurian delegate's breathing came in labored gasps.
This makes no sense,
Ixil muttered, checking the latest readings.
The foreign blood reactions are far more severe than that simple immune response. Unless...
He activated his analysis kit, taking fresh samples from both Bailey and the Centaurian. The kit's screen displayed preliminary results almost immediately.
Incredible.
Ixil's scales brightened with revelation.
The iron isn't the problem.
Care to explain that in a way a security chief can understand?
Jubilaxis asked, keeping watch at the door.
Human blood doesn't just contain iron. Their entire biology has evolved sophisticated systems to regulate it.
Ixil explained, excitedly pulsing his throat frills.
Their liver, their digestive system, even their cellular structures are all optimized for precise iron levels. But beyond that, they have multiple blood types with distinct protein patterns.
And that's bad?
No, it's brilliant.
Ixil's scales flashed with intensity.
The other species are getting worse because their simpler copper-based systems can't handle this level of biochemical complexity. Their bodies don't have the regulatory mechanisms to process iron properly, and their uniform blood chemistry has never had to deal with multiple protein configurations. Their immune systems are overreacting to what they perceive as several different pathogens and a toxin, like an allergy.
A groan from Bailey's bed drew their attention. The ambassador's eyes opened, focusing on them with surprising clarity.
"You're still researching?"
Bailey asked, voice rough.
"Even after they suspended you?" "Ambassador,"
Igzel moved closer.
"I need to ask you something. In human medical history, were there ever cases of blood transfusion reactions between humans?"
Bailey nodded slowly. Blood types? Different human populations developed different markers. Had to learn compatibility the hard way.
"Then it's a similar principle."
Igzel's scales rippled with excitement.
"Your blood is creating two distinct problems in the other delegates. Their bodies are dealing with both foreign proteins and iron exposure, similar to how different human populations had to develop tolerance to the different blood types. We need to treat both the metal toxicity and develop unique solutions for each species' protein reaction."
Fascinating discussion,
Jubilaxis interrupted.
but we got company. Multiple signatures approaching.
"Wait,
Bailey reached out, grabbing Igzel's arm with surprising strength.
my notes. Personal medical history. Rodriguez has them. Might help."
Igzel nodded quickly, then followed Jubilaxis back to the access panel. They barely made it through before voices echoed from the main corridor.
"Complete violation of quarantine protocols."
Quitsong's distinctive tone carried clearly.
"The human delegation must be held responsible."
For what?
Rodriguez's voice challenged.
For having biology that you don't understand?
For insisting on continuing diplomatic functions despite clear medical risks. Thanks to their stubbornness, we now have 7 critically ill delegates and no way to treat them.
Perhaps,
Vodkali's calm voice interrupted.
we should focus on finding solutions rather than assigning blame.
Hidden in the access corridor, Igzel's mind raced. The standard toxicity treatments weren't working because they weren't addressing the immune response, and normal immune suppressants would only make the iron toxicity worse. He needed Rodriguez's notes, and he needed them quickly.
I know that look.
Jubilaxis rumbled softly.
You're planning something stupid.
Not stupid.
Igzel's scale showed determination.
Necessary. The standard treatments aren't working because we're fighting 2 battles at once. We need to develop specific protein protocols for each species while simultaneously treating the iron exposure.
And how exactly do you plan to do that while suspended?
The same way humans learned about blood types.
Igzel replied.
Through careful observation and methodical testing. Their medical histories might show us how to approach these immune reactions.
He paused, throat frills contracting.
Although, I may need more help breaking quarantine protocols.
Jubilaxis sighed, tusks clicking in resignation.
The things I'd do for science. Come on, I know it back way to the diplomatic quarters, but if we get caught...
We won't,
Igzel assured him, though his scales betrayed his uncertainty.
And if we do, it won't matter. Without proper treatment protocols for both issues, these delegates won't survive long enough to file complaints.
Back in Igzel's lab, he quickly shared his findings about Bailey's transfusion history. Vodkali's scale shifted through patterns of shock, consideration, and finally, decision.
You believe these blood type principles could help us understand the immune response?
The medical data is clear, Igzel insisted. Bailey's records show how humans develop protocols for managing different blood types. If we can adapt those principles while simultaneously treating the iron toxicity...
It's completely unprecedented,
Vodkali noted, though his scales showed growing interest.
Treating both the toxic metal exposure and complex immune response across multiple species. We don't have time for precedent.
Jubilaxis rumbled.
Those delegates are dying.
A priority alert flashed across Igzel's tablet. The Centaurian vital signs were degrading rapidly. He was going into shock from his immune system's runaway reaction. Without treatment, they had hours at most. The other affected delegates would follow soon after.
Director,
Igzel's scales darkened with resolve.
I know this goes against every medical protocol we have, but those protocols were written before we encountered human biology. Their blood presents 2 distinct challenges we've never faced before. Both the iron content and these complex protein patterns. Just microscopic amounts from a spray in the middle of an explosion, or A couple droplets that happened to cross from close contact was enough to trigger a fatal immune response. We need a way to address the immune response without using suppressants that would likely cause the iron toxicity to kill them.
Vodkali studied him for a long moment, aged scales shifting through complex patterns of consideration. Finally, they settled into a new configuration Ixil hadn't seen before.
Do you understand that if you're wrong, you'll never practice medicine again? Worse, you'll likely face criminal charges.
Yes,
Ixil answered without hesitation.
but if I'm right, we'll do more than save these delegates. We'll open up an entirely new possibility for interspecies medical treatment. Imagine being able to share blood across species within just a few tweaks.
The director's scales rippled with something like pride.
Then you'd better hurry. I'll handle Quetzal and the administrative details. You focus on developing the treatment.
He turned to Jubilaxis.
I trust security can be just a little bit more lax than usual.
The security chief's tusks clicked with grim amusement.
Funny thing about emergencies, they tend to cause temporary malfunctions in security systems. Very unfortunate.
The quarantine ward's isolation field hummed as Ixil carefully prepared the first treatment dose. Bailey's blood samples, separated into their component elements, filled a series of specialized containment vials. The human diplomat watched from his bed, still weak but alert.
Are you sure this will work?
Rodriguez asked from the other side of the isolation field. She hadn't left the ward's observation area since Ixil began his preparations.
The theory is sound.
Ixil replied, his scales showing focused determination.
Ambassador Bailey's blood contains multiple distinct protein patterns. We can use that to develop species-compatible proteins that specifically neutralize those antigens, thereby removing the need for suppressants and allowing their immune systems to remove the iron without self-destructing. A side effect is that we could use similar proteins to eliminate antigens in any blood. Even the simple ones in most species' traditional copper-based blood can make cross-species transfusion possible. Though not with humans. Iron and copper just can't mix.
Theory won't help if Quetzal shuts us down.
Jubilaxis rumbled from his position by the door.
He's already demanding an emergency review board.
Well, then we'd better work quickly.
Ixil moved to the Centaurian's bed, medical scanner humming as if it analyzed the delegate's deteriorating condition.
Their immune response is getting worse, and the iron poisoning is accelerating the decline. Without proper treatment for both issues.
He trailed off as he administered the first dose of the dual-action treatment. The carefully balanced combination would either help stabilize the Centaurian systems or overwhelm them completely.
How long until we know it's working?
Rodriguez asked.
Minutes to see if the immune response is slowing. Hours to determine if it's able to self-regulate the iron.
Ixil's throat frills tightened as he watched the medical readouts.
Assuming that we've correctly balanced the treatments for their specific biology.
The ward's door slid open as Vodkali entered, his scales showing urgent patterns.
Quetzal has convinced 3 members of the medical board to convene immediately. They're demanding all the research data and treatment protocols.
Let them,
Ixil muttered, focusing on the Centaurian's readings.
The science will speak for itself.
A sudden change in the monitoring system's tone drew everyone's attention. The Centaurian's vital signs were shifting, their unique biological markers showing unexpected patterns.
What's happening?
Rodriguez demanded.
The antigen neutralization is working.
Ixil's scales brightened with cautious optimism.
Look at these readings. Their immune system is no longer attacking itself, and their natural chelation processes are activating.
Meaning what, exactly?
Jubilaxis asked.
Their body can finally focus on removing the iron properly, without the fighting of imagined threats.
Ixil quickly prepared doses for the other affected delegates.
We need to treat the others before
this unauthorized experiment goes any further.
Quetzal's voice cut through the ward as the head physician entered, followed by 3 senior medical officials. His scale showed patterns of absolute authority.
This stops now. With respect, head physician,
Ixil interjected.
Preliminary results show nothing but a potentially dangerous experiment on a wounded patient.
Quetzal interrupted.
This facility exists to heal, not conduct radical experiments on diplomatic delegates. Look at the readings,
Ixil insisted, gesturing to the Centaurian's improving vital signs.
The treatment is working. Their immune system is stabilizing and properly managing the iron content.
Temporary stabilization doesn't justify the risk,
one of the medical officials noted as he walked in alongside Quetzal and the other 2 he rang in.
The long-term effects of such protein manipulation are completely unknown.
Unknown is better than dead.
Bailey spoke up from his bed, voice weak but clear.
Your conventional treatments weren't working. Sometimes healing requires innovation. Innovation within proper protocols,
Quetzal countered.
not a reckless experimentation by a suspended junior xenobiologist with a dangerous obsession with human biology.
Ixchel's scales darkened with frustration as he checked the Centaurian's latest readings. The neutralizing proteins were working perfectly, allowing the delegates' natural systems to function. If they didn't administer similar treatment to the others...
You want protocols?
He challenged, pulling out the detailed scans in the main display.
Here are your protocols. We're not changing their biology. We're simply neutralizing the foreign proteins that are causing their immune system to overreact. The same principle could revolutionize cross-species medicine, at least among copper-based species. Revolutionize.
Quetzal's scales showed disbelief.
There's nothing revolutionary about...
A sudden gasp from the Centaurian's bed interrupted him.
How do you feel?
Ixchel asked quickly, running another scan.
Strange.
The Centaurian responded, their vocal tones indicating confusion, but not distress.
But... better. The burning sensation is... it's fading. Impossible.
One of the medical officials breathed, moving closer to study the readings. Impossible? Rodriguez's voice carried a note of challenge. Like having iron in our blood? The medical board's emergency session chamber felt colder than usual as Ixchel presented his findings. 3 hours had passed since the Centaurian's successful treatment, and the political battle had only intensified.
These proteins,
Ixchel explained, highlighting specific sections of data on the main display,
show how we can develop targeted neutralizing agents for blood antigens of any kind. The process is similar to how our own bodies naturally handle foreign proteins, just more precisely targeted. Precise targeting is hardly natural,
one of the medical officials objected, their ceremonial robes rustling as they leaned forward.
There is immense risk to introducing artificial proteins that aren't thoroughly tested in the body. It might neutralize an antigen or two, yes. But what else might that protein do? What consequences?
Are less severe than certain death.
Vodkali interrupted from his position near the chamber's entrance.
The Centaurian delegates' readings show their immune system has returned to normal function, and is now isolating the iron and preventing toxicity with no need for suppressants.
One successful case doesn't justify widespread application,
Quetzal argued, his scales showing rigid patterns of institutional authority.
This facility cannot endorse experimental treatments based on such limited data, especially on individuals of such import.
Ixchel's throat frills tightened with frustration.
While we debate, 6 other delegates continue to deteriorate. The Centaurian's recovery proves the treatment works. It proves nothing except for your willingness to gamble with lives,
Quetzal countered.
I'm submitting a formal recommendation for your permanent suspension from medical practice.
The chamber doors slid open as Chief Jubilaxis entered, his massive form drawing all attention.
Speaking of diplomatic lives, he rumbled, the ARC-10 delegation is threatening to withdraw from the summit entirely unless the representative receives treatment.
They can't possibly want this unauthorized.
Quetzal began.
They've reviewed the Centaurian's recovery data.
Jubilaxis interrupted, tusks clicking with barely suppressed amusement.
Their exact words were, "We choose innovation over ideology."
Ixchel seized the opportunity, bringing up new data on the display.
The Centaurian's recovery is remarkable. Their immune system has not only returned to normal function, but the protein neutralization process we developed appears to have broader applications. Their immune system appears to have accepted the artificial protein as an antigen and stored it in their memory T cells. He'll be able to produce it now on his own with no severe reaction, essentially immunizing him to human blood.
Impossible,
one of the officials muttered, though their tone held more wonder than skepticism.
It's becoming a rather common word lately,
Vodkali noted dryly.
Perhaps we should focus less on what we think is impossible, and more on what we can prove possible.
A priority alert flashed across the display. The Arctaran delegates' vital signs were degrading rapidly. Ixchel's scales darkened with urgency.
We don't have time for a debate,
he insisted.
The treatment works. The only question is whether we'll use it in time. The question...
Quetzal's scales flashed warning patterns.
is whether we'll maintain proper medical protocols or allow chaos to overtake our facility. This isn't just about treatment. It's about the fundamental principles of medical science.
No. Bailey's voice carried clearly as the human diplomat entered the chamber, supported by Rodriguez. His face was pale but determined.
It's about the fundamental principle of medical practice. Saving lives. Ambassador.
Quetzal's scale shifted to diplomatic patterns.
You should be resting in quarantine.
I should be helping,
Bailey countered, moving carefully to stand beside Ixil.
My blood is what poisoned them, right? It should be my blood that you used to create the cure for the other delegates. It's only right. The risk lies in rushing untested procedures.
Quetzal argued.
Our protocols exist for a reason.
Your protocols, Rodriguez pointed out,
were written before you even knew humans existed.
Sometimes protocols need to evolve too. Ixil's medical tablet chimed with another warning about the Arctaran's condition. His scales rippled with determination as he made a decision.
I'm going to treat the remaining delegates,
he announced, gathering his equipment.
If you want to stop me, you will have to physically restrain me, and then explain to every diplomatic delegation why you chose bureaucracy over the lives of their delegates. You'll lose your medical license,
Quetzal warned, scales showing threat patterns.
Then I lose it knowing I did what was right.
Ixil turned to leave, then paused.
Dr. Vodkali once told me that the greatest discoveries come from when we question our assumptions, when we dare to imagine the impossible.
Vodkali's age scale shifted to proud patterns as he moved in to join Ixil.
Indeed, and I believe it's time to imagine some new possibilities. Chief Jubilaxis, ensure our researchers have full access to the quarantine ward.
The security chief's tusks clicked with satisfaction.
Already done, Director. Though I suspect Quetzal might want to file some security violation reports.
File whatever you want,
Ixil said, heading for the door.
But file it after we save our patients.
The quarantine ward hummed with activity as Ixil moved between beds, monitoring each delegate's response to the treatment. The Arctaran's readings showed a similar, slow reaction the Centaurian had displayed, but they were stabilizing more quickly thanks to refinements in the process and a more confident administering of a higher dosage.
The antigen neutralization is proceeding more efficiently than with the Centaurian's case,
Ixil explained to Vodkali, who studied the readings with intense interest.
Each species' unique biology will help us refine the process.
Fascinating,
the doctor murmured, his scales showing patterns of scientific curiosity.
The neutralizing proteins need to be specifically tailored for each species' immune system.
Each species has slightly different immune responses,
Ixil confirmed, adjusting treatment parameters for the next delegate.
We have to customize the protein structure for optimal compatibility with each biology.
Bailey watched from his bed, where Rodriguez had finally convinced him to rest.
Human blood types evolve differently across populations. It makes sense that different species would need different solutions.
And now we're developing those solutions systematically,
Vodkali noted, his scales rippling with excitement.
This could revolutionize cross-species medical safety.
The ward's door slid open as Chief Jubilaxis entered, ducking his massive frame through the doorway.
2 more delegations are requesting the treatment,
he reported.
Not enough for emergency cases. They want immunization against potential human blood exposure.
Ixil's throat frills contracted with concern.
This treatment was developed for critical cases. Using it as a preventative measure is
a discussion for another time, Vodkali interrupted. Let us focus on our current patients.
The priority alert drew their attention to the Arctaran's bed. The delegate was regaining consciousness. Their skin, which was extremely darkly flushed, returned to its normal pale gray pallor.
How do you feel?
Ixil asked, running another scan.
Great,
the Arctaran responded, their harmonic voice carrying notes of relief.
The burning sensation, it's completely gone. I finally feel normal again. The neutralizing proteins are working perfectly,
Ixil confirmed, studying the readings.
Your body's natural systems are properly processing the remaining ion.
Impossible.
Impossible,
a familiar voice declared from the doorway. Quetzal entered, followed by a full medical review board.
Targeted protein manipulation at this scale cannot be stable.
Clearly, the Arctaran delegate responded dryly.
It is.
They turned their multifaceted eyes to the review board.
I don't understand your resistance to this treatment. It saved my life. The treatment is dangerous and unauthorized,
Quetzal insisted, his scales showing stubborn patterns.
These protein interactions could have long-term consequences we can't predict.
Unlike the very predictable consequence of death without treatment, Rodriguez challenged. Ixo focused on preparing the next treatment dose, letting the political argument wash over him. The medical data was irrefutable. Each treated patient showed successful neutralization of the human antigens, allowing their natural systems to function properly.
The Centaurian's latest readings,
He announced, highlighting key data points on the main display.
Immune response has normalized completely. The iron has been fully purged out of their system.
And the other patients show similar recovery patterns, and provide more data for how to apply the treatment to a wider variety of cases.
Votkali added, his age scales displaying teaching patterns.
Data gathered through reckless experimentation. You're lucky it worked at all. You could have killed them.
Quetzal countered.
No,
Bailey spoke up, his voice stronger than it had been in days. Innovation is necessary. My people learned that the hard way. Our science stagnated for decades for exactly the same arguments that you offer now. When new and novel plagues and conditions struck, we were unprepared precisely because the established institutions were unwilling to test novel ideas, unwilling to take risks. The review board members exchanged glances, their formal robes rustling as they studied the mounting evidence. Ixil continued his work, knowing that ultimately the results would speak louder than any argument.
the treatment will continue, Votkali declared firmly, under my direct supervision. Quetzal, you're welcome to document your objections for the official record, but you will not interfere with saving lives.
Ixil's scales brightened slightly as he administered another treatment dose. They weren't just saving lives anymore, they were discovering something profound about the nature of biology itself. Something that would change medical science forever. The process of generating artificial proteins that can target other proteins is a direct key into a cellular process that was once obtuse and labyrinthian. So much so that it was believed an impossible dream. This goes far beyond preventing blood type mismatch. The facility's main conference chamber had been converted into a temporary medical research center, its elegant diplomatic furnishings pushed aside to make room for analysis equipment. 2 weeks had passed since the first successful treatment. Ixil studied the latest batch of protein interaction data, the scales showing patterns of intense concentration. Behind him, representatives from 12 different species observed proceedings with keen interest.
The neutralization process has broader applications,
He explained, highlighting specific data streams.
The principles we've developed for handling human blood antigens could be adapted for treating other protein-based immune reactions. This could revolutionize treatments for autoimmune disorders and improve compatibility between copper-based species.
And these treatments are reliable? Asked the Octarn representative, their crystalline form refracting as they moved closer to examine the data.
Completely reliable,
Votkali confirmed from his position near the main display.
Follow-up studies show no adverse reactions, and the immunity appears permanent.
Bailey, finally fully recovered, stood with Rodriguez near the chamber's observation windows.
Earth's medical database shows how human populations develop different blood types through exposure. Our immune systems evolved sophisticated recognition protocols over generations.
And now we can apply those principles to other species,
Ixil added, his throat frills expanding with enthusiasm.
The possibilities for improving cross-species medical safety are extraordinary.
The chamber's door slid open as Chief Jubilaxis entered, followed by several members of the medical board. The security chief's tusks clicked with satisfaction as he observed the gathered delegates.
The Summit Security Committee has officially cleared the treatment for broader testing,
He announced.
though they're still arguing about protocols for non-emergency applications. Some argument is healthy,
Votkali noted, his age scales showing amusement.
It keeps us from becoming too rigid in our thinking.
The subtle ripple of reaction passed through the gathered representatives at his words. Everyone understood the reference to Quetzal, who had taken an extended leave of absence after the medical board rejects his attempts to block the treatment program. Speaking of protocols, Rodriguez interjected, Earth's Medical Council has submitted a preliminary framework for standardizing the treatment across species. They're calling it the Bailey-Ixil Protocol. Ixil's scales shifted to patterns of surprise.
That's not necessary. I simply followed the evidence.
You did more than that, Bailey countered. You question fundamental assumptions about biology. That's exactly the kind of thinking we need for successful interspecies medicine.
And speaking of successful medicine,
Vodkali added, his scale showing formal patterns.
the medical board has reached a decision regarding your status, Ixil.
The young xenobiologist's throat frills contracted nervously. Despite the treatment's success, he had technically violated numerous protocols. His career still hung in the balance.
After reviewing all evidence,
Vodkali continued,
and considering your extraordinary circumstances, the board has decided to not only reinstate your medical license, but to create a new research division specifically for investigating cross-species protein-based treatments. They want you to lead it.
The chamber fell silent as Ixil processed this information. His scale shifted through patterns of shock, disbelief, and finally, determination.
I am honored,
He said carefully.
but I hope the position allows for continued hands-on research. There's still so much to learn about species-specific immune responses and protein interactions.
I believe that can be arranged,
Vodkali replied, his scale showing proud patterns.
especially since several delegations have already pledged research support.
The Arctaran Science Council is particularly interested in studying how the neutralization process adapted to silicate-based biology, the Arctaran representative added. The implications for improving medical compatibility between different physiologies are fascinating. Ixil turned back to his data display, mind racing with possibilities. What had started as a crisis response had evolved into something far more significant, a fundamental shift in how they understood cross-species medicine. 3 months after the summit, Ixil stood in his new research laboratory, surrounded by state-of-the-art equipment and a team of scientists from multiple species. The facility's Immunological Research Center had grown far beyond its original emergency response role.
The latest results from the Centaurian long-term study are remarkable,
He explained to Vodkali, who had become a regular visitor to the lab.
The immunization protocol has proven completely stable, and we developed similar treatments for 15 other species.
Medical science advancing,
The director observed, his age scale showing patterns of satisfaction.
though I suspect Quetzal would still object to the pace of progress.
Quetzal's latest paper actually cites our research,
Ixil noted, his throat frills expanding with amusement.
though he focuses mainly on the importance of careful documentation and controlled trials.
Some lessons are harder to learn than others,
Vodkali mused.
Speaking of learning, your human colleagues have arrived.
The lab's main door slid open as Bailey and Rodriguez entered, followed by a team of Earth medical researchers. The human diplomat looked completely recovered, showing no lasting effects from the incident. The Earth Medical Council has officially approved the expanded trials, Bailey announced. They're particularly interested in preventative applications for diplomatic and first contact scenarios. The immunization protocols you developed have implications far beyond emergency treatment, Rodriguez added. Early tests suggest that we could develop similar treatments for a variety of cross-species immune responses. Ixil's scales brightened with scientific excitement.
Understanding how different species' immune systems handle foreign proteins could be the key to safer interspecies medicine. We have barely scratched the surface of possible applications.
And to think,
Chief Jubilaxis rumbled as he entered the lab.
it all started because we thought iron in blood was impossible.
His tusks clicked with amusement.
Makes you wonder what other impossible things we might discover. That's the real lesson here.
Vodkali observed, his scales showing teaching patterns.
Not just about human biology, but about the danger of assuming we understand all the rules of life itself.
Ixil moved to one of the observation windows, watching as patients from various species underwent treatment in the adjacent medical bay. Each successful immunization added to their understanding, revealed new possibilities.
I received an interesting communication from Quetzal this morning,
He said quietly.
He's requesting permission to observe our next round of trials. Says he wants to better understand the practical applications of theoretical immunology.
Growth comes in many forms,
Vodkali noted, his scales showing profound satisfaction.
sometimes through crisis, sometimes through careful study. The wise scientist remains open to both paths.
A priority alert drew their attention to one of the main displays. New data from the first Quernican studies showed unexpected developments in how their crystalline biology processed the immunization proteins. Ready to document another impossible discovery? Rodriguez asked, gathering research tablets.
No,
Ixil replied, his scales showing patterns of pure scientific joy.
ready to document another possibility we just hadn't imagined yet.